Hey there, all things Montessori community. I hope everyone's doing all right. Believe it or not, we're still in quarantine. It's almost May. Oh, crazy. But I hope you guys are doing all right. Our episode today is all about geography. So we tackle another album, and Jamie and I really talk through kind of all the aspects of it. We didn't even cover all of it because it's a huge album, but we talk through experiments, economic geography, the sun and the earth, God Who Has No Hands, that huge, great story we launch elementary with. We really get into it. It was so fun to talk about geography and completely made me realize and remember how much I love it. So I hope you guys enjoy. If you have any questions, of course, always email us, allthingsmontessoripod@gmail.com. We love getting your emails. And always send us a message on Instagram too, All Things Montessori. Thanks for continuing to listen and support us. And I hope you enjoy this episode. Hey, Jamie, how are you?
Hey, Rachel. Doing pretty well.
Yeah?
Yep. Still at home, staying safe. All of that.
It's almost May. Isn't that fun?
It is almost May. It's kind of hard to believe.
I know. My birthday's next week, and I didn't envision myself celebrating my birthday in a quarantine when this all started. I thought, oh, well, by May, of course, we'll be done.
Yeah, we were talking with some friends, neighbors yesterday about how when, the first order came to work at home, everyone's, set up temporary at-home workspaces, not really thinking about the long term of it, just kind of thinking, not conscious about it, thinking a couple of weeks or something. And here we are, 5-6 weeks later. And those work at home desks aren't quite as comfortable and the chairs aren't quite as comfortable, we didn't quite think about this long haul, but
we didn't at all.
It is where we have to be. So
it is. Yeah, I had the thought that my husband and I could work from home in the same room when this all started out. And while I love him, obviously, but that lasted about a week. And then it's like, I have to go. I can't see you all the time at work and then at night and then not be able to go anywhere else.
Yeah. It's just a whole different world. But, we're all still happy and healthy here. So that's a good thing. And able to, get lots of other things done around the house. So that's good too.
Yeah, there's lots of blessings, hidden in this really, really scary time. There is a lot more space for us to do those things that usually life is too busy to let us do. So that's a really good point. And I think it's good for humanity to slow down. One of my absolute favorite benefits of this pandemic is that the environment is doing great. So that's one positive thing, that we're helping our earth.
Right. So, but we thought today we'd take up another album and talk about geography, some of the basic principles, but then also how that can be, particularly in this time, adapted or supported at home. So that, parents can help children explore and be excited. I think as a trainer and a consultant in classrooms, I can, oftentimes when I go visit classrooms, I see a lot of math and language, and geography is one that is often less evident on a day-to-day basis. So I'm a big proponent of bringing this work into the classroom and this kind of exploration, and how parents can support that right now at home too.
Yeah, I think geography, I'm just reflecting upon my own teaching experience, it's a really intimidating album because there's a lot of things you need, or at least your mind thinks you need for it. I remember setting up my classroom and just really getting stuck in the geography section because, especially with the experiments, which is the children's probably their most favorite part, there's a lot of things that go into that. And then especially like, what if you don't have a water source? What if you don't have a backyard space? I mean, there's a lot to think through with the geography. But I will say, once you do get a system down, you'll notice more and more that the children choose geography a lot, and they love it. And and geography can filter into, as everything else in Montessori, it can filter into a lot of different other subject areas, and it really, I think, it completes the whole classroom.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, and I think that's a really good point that when you see when you have the environment prepared, children are going to choose it. I mean, it makes sense, right? When you've gotten all the materials they need, when it's all present in the classroom, they're going to choose that. So it is, but it is, you're right, Rachel, I've heard that exact thing from numerous other teachers, that it is an overwhelming preparation to a certain extent because there are lots of little details. Even for the first story, we tell the first grade story, there's, 6
Right.
demonstrations. And
Exactly.
and
I remember being like, "Oh my god, I have to do this the first day?"
right, right. I mean, it is there are a lot of little pieces, but once you really can get your mind around it and start getting that material in there, it's logical and it becomes straightforward. But yeah, it can be a little overwhelming. So we hope that this will inspire those of you in classrooms to be thinking about this as you're away from your classroom. You can pull together, start building your Amazon list or other lists of things to build those supplies that you need. And at home, some of the things, some of the demonstrations or the ideas we're trying to present to children are, kind of with general kitchen items. So it's possible that you can even do some of these explorations at home.
Oh, absolutely. I think, when you're in training, or even, during your first few years of teaching, you want it to be just perfect. But I think there's a lot of substitutions. There's a lot of, you don't need to get the exact right, thing for this experiment, unless it's, going to be a chemical reaction. Of course, that's something. But, there's lots of liquids that don't go together. I mean, you can sort of improvise, I think, in a lot of areas, if you just sort of do some research and things like that. I remember, I couldn't find, in the great story, in God Who Has No Hands, there's a part where you turn, and I think in my album it said little BB things, like little beads, but it was for, I
Hmm.
can't even remember what it was, but I remember I could never find what that was. And so, but I improvised and I got these little stones, and it was fine. It didn't
Hmm.
matter, but
Hmm.
in my mind that was a big deal because I wanted it to be perfect for the children. But as long as you're getting the point across, as long as it's clear, you're fine. That's really all that it is.
Right. And that concept we want to get across on that one is that we want the children to imagine the state of a liquid, and it's like the little particles in a liquid just roll over each other.
Hmm.
And so we want those little spheres, little BBs or little ball bearings, to roll over each other to help the children's imagination think about what's happening, because a liquid is so different from a solid. So that's a really interesting way that we approach some of these scientific principles, because we're approaching it from the standpoint of sowing little seeds of knowledge or giving the children little images of concepts, to prepare their minds for the systematic study of science later. But early on, we want them to have these kinds of images and an understanding of the idea or the concept or the law.
Hmm. Yeah, when I studied geography in school, I mean, it was all about, the states, countries, things like that, like how that is, how our world is made up in that way. And the way Maria Montessori designed the geography album is quite fantastic, and it really does call to the imagination of the elementary child. When geography, I think, can be misconstrued or misinterpreted as sort of boring, almost like, oh, it's just about,
Mhm.
rocks or, and that sort of, to be honest, that's kind of how I felt about it. I felt the same way about geometry too. And it's just because I didn't experience it like Maria Montessori. You experience everything in the Montessori classroom, especially when you're between the ages of like 6, 7, and 8, when you're first starting. You are experiencing the concrete concepts that she's talking about. And I think she really, really does that in geography. And it's all just hands-on learning, just,
Right.
it's hands-on, it's visual, it's right there. It's almost like you're just encompassed by it. And that, I will say too, you'll never forget it, in that way, because you're experiencing it almost with your whole body.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and it is different. We call it the geography album in our Montessori work, but it contains a variety of sciences,
Hmm.
right? It's
Right.
got
Oh yeah.
geology, earth sciences, physics, chemistry. It's all there within what we call a geography album. And then there's also the exploration of physical and political geography
Right.
as well. So there's a lot that's happening in the geography album. And what we're really helping the children to see in the elementary is that we start with this great story of the formation of the universe, and we want to tie sort of all their subsequent knowledge in the sciences to the universe and how it relates to the laws that things follow and throughout the universe. So it's a sort of, from that standpoint, a really different approach
Hmm.
um, to science, but one that really completely responds to uh, children's development. So when they're at this age, they want to use their imaginations to think and to understand, and they love the vastness of the universe. That's what Montessori saw,
Hmm.
that's what can appeal to children of this age. So we give it to them. We give them the whole universe, and then we start exploring some of the details within.
That's right. Yeah, we really we started so vast, and it's so big that you can't even wrap your head around it. But every time I've given God Who Has No Hands, it's like they're just so eager for more. And it doesn't matter if they've heard the story 5 times; they are still there, because you're always going to invite children back, every year, even if they've heard it before. Um, and they eat it up. They love it. And you're right. And then we start to dive down into, the smaller details. Starting with things like the formation of the earth and the earth's layers and those sorts of things, more concrete concepts that the children can then start to understand. But it's really important to start with that big universe. Um,
Hmm.
mhm,
Yeah, yeah, and then explore how things settled, how
mhm.
liquids settle according to their weight. These kinds of explorations can happen at home as well, where you pour different liquids into one another. We use,
Yep,
molasses,
right.
oil, and water
Yep.
to see um, how liquids settle based on their weight. It's pretty an incredible thing to watch. Wow, that one's heavier. It pushes through to the bottom.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that experiment alone is, it's sort of a gift that keeps on giving, because I find that they're always fascinated by it. And molasses is just a funky liquid. So next time you're at the grocery store, if you're still going, or I don't know if you're getting delivery or anything, if you can go in the baking section and get molasses, I would definitely recommend that for your elementary child. And obviously you're going to have water, hopefully, of some sort. yeah, it's a great experiment. And there's a lot of discovery that can happen with that. And then it can lead to, well, I wonder what this other liquid would do, and then it just sort of goes on from there.
Yep. Yep. So we can explore the different states of matter. We talk
Hmm.
about this in the context of how the universe formed, but we also then explore each state of matter in isolation, or at least solid, liquids, and gases, how temperature can affect them, um, how they behave, so um, the particles of a solid really like each other. They it takes a tremendous amount of force to separate them, whereas the particles of a liquid, they're so accommodating. They just let things pass through and they just go back to where they were. Um, Part of what we do when we tell these stories or these ideas to children is we do occasionally, personify or attribute emotions to some of it, because it makes the story or the concept really fun for the children. Of course, they know that water doesn't have a
Hmm.
consciousness, but what fun it is to play a game of thinking that way about how those particles are following their laws. So that's one technique that we apply throughout the way we approach all of the things in the work we do with elementary children, but that sort of fairy tale, fantastic, or anthropomorphizing of different things to capture their imaginations and their interest.
Yeah, and they're at the stage of their development when they can handle that. We wouldn't do this
Right.
in primary, because they need to be focused on, what's real, in their environment. And once they hit that second plane around 6 or 7, like they know the difference, between the fantastical and the real. And they like to get lost in the fantasy. I know I did as a
Mm.
child, and I've seen it with elementary children. I mean, it's so fun to imagine. So yeah, exactly. I mean, you could make a states of matter presentation super, super boring, which I feel like is how I was presented it. Because it's not all that exciting unless you make it exciting, right? And so, yeah, Jamie, just making, having that's hilarious what you just even said about water being accommodating. Like that made me laugh, and I'm not an elementary child, right? It's funny. And it makes it more enjoyable, and the children can have fun with that too. Yeah, it's just
Yep.
it's something, and it also makes it really fun for the guide as well to sort of,
Right.
dramatize and make those fun stories. Yeah.
And of course, like in our albums or the work we do on a training course, we have these ideas presented this way and they really appeal to all the children, but particularly to the young children. If I were working with older children, then I'm going to shift the presentation slightly,
Right,
where
right.
we will get into the scientific detail of what's going on in these different states and what makes that possible. It's not the consciousness of,
Right.
it's not the
Right.
decision to be accommodating or whatever. And
Mhm.
so when we present these first, Montessori said our job is to sow seeds, sow these ideas in the children, the fertile imagination of the children, and support them to germinate. And part of the supporting of these ideas, once we've tossed them out there, is to nurture it with greater scientific depth as they get older. So we certainly will respond as the children need and as they gain more knowledge. But the introduction is really sensorial. Like you said, we do a lot of demonstrations and experiments, and we are going to try to really inspire their imaginations, because all of these different things that we study in science, a lot of it we have to imagine. When we present the sun and the earth to the children, we talk about the relationship between the sun and the earth.
Mhm.
They can see the sun, but they have to imagine the fact that the earth is moving around the sun, right? Because it doesn't look like that's what's happening.
Right, right. Exactly. And it's a very abstract thing to think about. And even to be rooted on the planet right now and know that the earth is turning, it's really
Mhm.
it's that's tough.
Mhm.
And so I remember You presented this, I think, on the course, Jamie, when you keep turning the earth and going around the sun and like you keep going. I feel like you did it for like a minute, but they need that much time to sort of just see that it's continually happening, I don't know.
Well, to be honest, Rachel, the adults need it more than the children
I
almost.
know.
In my experience,
Yeah.
the sun and earth is a tough one. But if at school and at home, if you have a globe of some sort, or even a sphere that
Yeah.
can represent the globe,
Mhm.
and you have a lamp that you can take the shade off and just use the light bulb to stand as the source of, as the sun, you can do this work um, uh, of the sun and the earth, and helping children to see how that gives us night and day, how that gives us, the how the tilt of the earth works with that to give us the different seasons as we move, because it's so nice. Even if you just had, I don't know, like a Nerf ball or styrofoam ball on a skewer or a knitting needle, you can tilt that so you can see how the Earth's axis is tilted. And when you have that against a light source, you really can see, oh wow, when the northern hemisphere is tilted toward the sun like that, you can see the night and day is, the days are longer, the nights are shorter. Obviously, we're getting more of the sun's energy at this time, and so obviously we're going to have summer when it's warmer. I mean, some of those basic ideas are so clear with that demonstration. And if you're interested in doing that at home, there's a great resource on, I think which I've said before, but the crashcourse.com has a great little video about it that could guide you in setting up that demonstration at home. And there's lots of exploration that can happen about the relationship between the earth and the sun and how that impacts our seasons and the temperature zones on the planet. All of that can emerge from that exploration, which of course the children love to do in the classroom, and certainly is possible to explore at home.
Oh, sure. That's a good one. Absolutely. And you're right. You just need some sort of spear and a light bulb, and yeah, it's definitely doable at home, of course.
And and some of you might have to brush up on your knowledge of it. This was one area that I remember in my own original training. I didn't remember learning any of that. I mean, I knew that the earth went around the sun, and I knew a year was 365 days. I had that basic, but the tilt and the understanding
I
of
know.
seasons
It's
and why we have solstices and equinoxes, that I didn't.
I had no idea either.
I didn't remember learning.
Mhm.
And so that was something I learned on the course and continued to learn through my career with children. And it's wonderful to be able to understand. But if you don't really understand it, that's okay. It's possible to learn it.
Yes.
It's possible to learn it.
It definitely is. Yeah, that was a total refresher for me too. And just, it's so beautiful. Yeah, I knew that there were things called equinoxes, and I knew about the solstices, of course. I was in an a cappella group in college called Solstice, and I didn't really understand what it was until I took Montessori training. So that's fun. How life just, anyway. Yeah, but just that huge idea that we are going around that orb in the sky, the sun, and then you can really your child or you or your class or whatever, you can observe, right, the seasons changing, because we already had spring come right now, but we're going to go into another season change, in about a month and a half or so, into summer, and that's another great opportunity for observation, to watch that happen.
That is if you're in the northern hemisphere.
Oh, right.
If you're
right.
in the southern
I have
hemisphere,
to think globally. Sorry, but there's other seasons there.
You're heading into winter,
Right.
and if you're listening to us anywhere near the equator, we know that seasons don't change like we experience. But the nice thing about these demonstrations is that no matter where you live, so I live in the northern hemisphere, so I'm regularly orienting to that, or orienting the children to that. No matter where you live, it helps to explain why you do or don't have these different seasons, or why your temperature, is the way it is, why
Oh,
we have
sure.
variation in temperature or not variation in temperature. So wherever you are, make sure that you're centering it on the child's experience, and then you can explore. Elementary children love to think, oh, right now we're headed toward the longest day of the year where we live, but in Australia they're headed toward the shortest day of the year. That you orient to where the children are, but then they love to think about how it's different in other places on the planet. So these are really fun conversations to have with children, and especially as they are, far more aware of the global community that we are. It can be really fun to explore the different places on the globe with them, with sun and
Absolutely.
earth, and with other things. I mean, we can do that too with our interdependencies and economic geography work.
Yeah, and especially right now, I think we're all we're a little bit more globally minded, right now, because
Mm-hmm.
we're all sort of united by this common enemy, good old coronavirus. And so I think more than ever we really are thinking of, wow, what's going on there? Or, we're all sort of united by that. So that's something that definitely you want to explore. And what Jamie was talking about, the interdependencies in economic geography, those are pretty simple presentations, especially in the beginning. And there's a lot of room for that right now. Just thinking about where things come from, like we do a presentation on where bread comes from and how many people and how many steps it took for you to eat that piece of bread this morning. And right now, a lot of those steps and people and all of that is sort of it's hugely impacted. Um, and it can also help, your child or whatever, have just a huge amount of gratitude for all of that. It almost makes you take a step back and be like, wow, there was a lot that, went into my breakfast today,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and now one of the things I've been trying to do is visit more farmers markets, than the grocery store, just because I know that, farmers are, hurting right now, and in certain areas. And also it's just like a less populated area to go. But, thinking about what all of the things the farmer produces right now, and how it's vital that we're all getting that, and what their jobs are. Um, yeah, there's just so much exploration, and specifically right now, to understand, all those essential workers, so to speak, all the work that they're doing. Um,
Right. So I mean, like at home, these are just conversations you can have, and you
mhm.
could draw little pictures of all. If you think through like all the people who, got you the bread that you're eating or whatever. Even if you made your own bread, how did you get the
Yeah.
flour and the yeast to
Mhm.
do that? Um, and that sort of thinking through, one of the big themes throughout all the work that we do with children in Montessori Elementary is a theme of gratitude. We're really grateful to everything in the universe, that it's following its laws and doing what it's supposed to do to maintain the harmony of the universe. And we're grateful to other humans, the ones we know and the ones we don't know, both living now and in the past, that have helped us to be able to have the life that we live today. So it's a good time to think about gratitude for others, for all those essential workers that are continuing to do their jobs so the rest of us can continue to live. And I think that's a great sort of interdependency lesson or discussion that teachers could have if they're doing remote instruction right now, or parents could do with their children at home.
Mhm.
And then it ties right into an exploration of economics. And, elementary children really like to explore how our economy works. And, we're really heightened to the issues with our economy right now, since a lot of our economy has had to stop working.
Mhm.
So those are things we can explore with the children too, like what is produced, where, in our country, in our state. And you're seeing news stories of the problems with production and consumption right now, where food is being left to rot because it's not being sold to restaurants and it can't get anywhere else. And so with young children, maybe you don't want to explore those too deeply,
Yeah.
or anything that might be distressing. But for the older children, that kind of thing is really fascinating. How can we live in a world where some people aren't eating and we're throwing away food because we can't get it there? These explorations of our economy are really interesting. But even as simple as just seeing what's produced where, what are we not getting because it's produced somewhere else? How do we have trade partners, or what do we import and export? Those are great explorations that children could be working on at home right now, and has real pertinent value based on what's going on.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, especially now. I mean, there's ample amount of ways or avenues to go down and explore. And it's also just what a skill to learn about economics and all of this at a young age. Um, and in sort of in a crisis right now. This is it's not good what's happening. And it could be pretty fascinating for an elementary child to dig into it. But yeah, I agree with Jamie. Definitely the older elementary children, it's a bit scary, even for adults right now, to really look into it.
Well, Montessori, with those presentations too, when she was really talking about economic geography and the interdependencies of sort of all nations in the world, she really wanted children to kind of get this sense. I mean, when you look at the volume of trade and how things are imported and exported, it is almost like a circulatory system. She really saw it as this deep interconnectedness around the world, and that we have to be conscious of keeping that system healthy. Which of course it's not right now, but we're kind of out of the ordinary. But how do we look and think toward health? And
Right.
and those are questions that especially older elementary children do like to ponder. They don't get quite as scared as we might as adults. They don't have as much sort of life experience to make them have the ability to think of more worst case scenarios. So they can just be really straightforward and problem solving about it, which is great. It's a great exercise for them. But what other things can they do in the geography area?
We were chatting before this. So one of my personal favorites of this album is The River and all the work of water. And it's April, so April showers, and it's going to rain all week. Wherever you are, it's going to rain all week here, but wherever you are in the world, hopefully you have some sort of water source, or you can have a globe or a map or something where you can look at water, or maybe you go out and find a small creek or water. Right now, that's something that I find that elementary children are pretty excited about all the time. I even remember when I was like 8 years old, I made a river in my backyard with one of my neighborhood friends, and I didn't even go to Montessori school. So I think any child right now is going to be excited about the river. So the work of water is something that is pretty concrete and something you can just go outside and look at. When I was in the classroom, we actually had a dry creek bed in our outdoor environment, so I could, fill it up, or if it rained, we'd go out, and I always used a real thing outside. I think you did too, right, Jamie? You said that you used a...
Yeah, I usually showed the work of water on a hillside across the street at a park. Or you can do it in a gutter, to be honest, in the middle of a city street if it's been raining and there's water. Because what we want the children to see with the work of water is we want to see them to see that the river carves, carries, and deposits. So even in a street gutter, you could, pour a little bit of dirt or rocks or some other things into the gutter so that you can show that the water is carving that away, carrying it, and depositing it at the bottom of the street or down the drain or whatever. You don't want to flood the drain with debris, but you can give that give that sense. And so,
Yeah.
so we start the work of water with that presentation where they really think about, the job of water is to fill every crevice, and it flows downwards and sometimes sideways a little bit, but it also carves and carries and deposits. And that
Yeah.
can launch exploration into studying different rivers of the world, or looking at local rivers,
Oh,
or
yeah.
looking at how water and land interact.
Yep. And you can look at erosion, all of those sorts of things, the negative impacts kind of that water's had. Um, it's sort of infinite. You
Yeah,
know,
water is ice.
hmm
This is a great experiment that you can do with children if you have a glass bottle that you don't care about at home. Fill it to the very brim with water, like to the very top, and put the lid on. And then wrap it in a plastic bag and stick it in the freezer. And water does this amazing thing when it freezes, and it expands, and
hmm
you'll see that the bottle breaks. And so the children will see that, and then we can talk about the impact of ice on the land in terms of erosion. That when it's within aspects of the land, it can erode the land away, and we can talk about the power of a glacier and other things. So, there's lots of ways that we explore these exciting concepts with the children, and a lot of them totally doable at home.
Yeah, they really are. I mean, I think a lot of it, especially work of water right now, just going outside and experiencing it, or maybe filling up your bathtub, and you can, I mean, this isn't work of water necessarily, but you can make waves in your bathtub, or things like that. I don't know.
That's
um,
totally work of water.
oh, I know, but
How
I was thinking about the moon. I was like, there's a lot of things going on there.
But you can totally explore some of that, or put some sand or dirt in a bin and see
hmm
how waves erode. So some of this exploration of what water does on our planet is really fun to do at home. I would say one thing to keep in mind that we do in the classroom when children are introduced to various demonstrations, the first time we do it, the adult does it and shows the child.
hmm
And then when we're ready to have the child start doing it, they're going to do it, alongside of an adult. So there's supervision and guidance, and, the appropriate sort of approach or scientific seriousness to it all. And then once we feel confident that they can do some of these demonstrations from start to finish, we'd step away and let them do it independently. So it's something to keep in mind at home. If you're going to try to do any sort of science experiment, yes, of course, we want the children to get their hands on it, but also it can cause a lot of frustration if they end up sort of losing control and making a big mess, or getting, out, whatever emerges, and then maybe you
hmm
don't feel like doing it anymore
Yeah.
as an
Yeah.
adult. So what you want to do is be sure that you're guiding and scaffolding until the child is capable of doing it independently, from the setup all the way through to the cleanup. And that just takes assistance and support until you can see the child is ready to handle that independently. Otherwise, you just need to be there guiding and supporting until they can.
Yeah, and once they can, then it's sort of, it's such a benefit, right? Because then they're going to be occupied and they can do it anytime. But it's
Yep.
important. It's so important to lay that groundwork and those expectations, because I've learned this the hard way. If you don't set those
Hmm.
clear expectations up front, it's really hard to kind of backtrack.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're paying for it for a long time
you
after.
are. You are.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so I think that's just another thing to keep in mind. We explore the work of air, so we explore how air works on our planet and
hmm
impacts the water cycle, and it impacts
The winds
temperatures and
and
winds and
currents.
currents.
Yeah.
So those are different things to explore, and of course, anything else that is exciting for the children, anything else that they find interesting. Let's do a little bit of research and plant another seed for them to help them further that interest. If they're really interested in gravity or plate tectonics, I mean, we've got little presentations to get them started, but we certainly want to keep that interest alive and keep supporting it. And I think that's the biggest thing I would say to parents right now at home with children is do whatever you can to keep them excited and curious. That's the most
Mm-hmm.
important. Like, whatever we feel like we're losing in terms of instructional time now doesn't matter as, the specific skills as much as if we lose some of that excitement and interest. So if you can keep your children engaged, if you can question them, if you can keep them exploring, that's going to help all of the guides when they get them back in the classroom, much more than whether they've conquered some particular, math skill or something.
So true. So true. Yeah, engagement and that passion, that spark. That's the most important thing. Well, I hope this inspired some of you guys. I definitely feel inspired. Actually, I love geography. It's so fun to talk about it, and it really is applicable to the home. And I hope you guys, I hope this was helpful.
Yep. I hope maybe you bring some of it to your distance learning or whatever. And if you have questions, don't hesitate. Another great, you can go online and find lots of experiments and things to do. And there's a set of books by Janice Van Cleve about different science areas. I think they're, it'd be physics for every kid or, there's those, but there's lots of great resources out there. So any of these kinds of demonstrations that are going to engage the child and present a concept is really worthwhile trying to do at this time.
Definitely. And always, start like do one step at a time. I mean,
Yep.
again, geography is super overwhelming and there's a lot of components to it. But even if you just start off with that liquid experiment we were talking about, how
Yep.
liquids, settle at different weights and settle according to their weight. That's something that's pretty simple. Yeah. So
Yep.
enjoy geography, everybody. And if you have any questions, always reach out to us, send us an email or, DM us on Instagram. We love hearing from you guys. And everybody hang in there.
Yep. Take care.